Hey everyone, I'm Rob Glover, and this is writing micro lesson number 2 on properly citing sources. And this is for Honors 111 in the Civilization sequence of the Honors College at the University of Maine. So, citations are very important. Citing sources is very important. And today we're going to be talking about what citations are, why we use them, the reasons that we cite sources, and kind of how to cite and how to use citations effectively. So first off, what are citations? The easiest way to think about citations is that they clarify the lineage of ideas. So in the same way that, the family tree establishes who your parents and who your grandparents and who your ancestors are, citations help to establish who is putting forth ideas. So they establish where the ideas come from, where claims come from, facts, and also how to find them. So you can kind of utilize citations to backtrack and find the original source. On your right-hand side, you see some examples of citations, right? So at the top are in-text citations. That's one form of citation that you can use. And you just see, there are these parenthetical citations at the end of a sentence, and you have authors' names and years. Down in the bottom, you have a bibliography. And depending on what citation style you use, this will be called references, it'll be called bibliography, works cited, right? But that is where you would go with this particular style, where you would go to find the full citation information for that source. So if you wanted to find it, you could go and track it down. Both of these are really important. It's not sufficient just to kind of throw in an in-text citation if you don't have the corresponding bibliographic information at the end of the paper, the piece of writing. And that means that person has no idea how to find that the source of that idea, right? So it's important to utilize both. Now, depending on what citation style you use, that will determine what this looks like specifically. So sometimes it's parenthetical citations. Sometimes it's footnotes where the citation will appear down in the lower margin, and it'll be kind of on the page where it's cited. Sometimes it's endnotes where you'll see a number in superscript kind of up above the line, and then you have to flip to the end of the piece of writing to figure out what specifically they're citing. So there's a variety of different ways, and what this looks like specifically will depend on the citation style. Now, a citation style is it's a systematic way of communicating that information about where ideas and claims and facts are drawn from. And there's all sorts of different citation styles. So you'll see references to MLA, APA, right? Those are references, those acronyms actually stand for professional organizations that have developed these systematic ways of citing sources. So MLA is the Modern Language Association, APA is the American Psychological Association, my professional organization, the American Political Science Association, has its own formatting style, APSA. Chicago style is also another citation style. It doesn't really matter for me and for this class what citation style you use. You might want to talk to some of your professors in your major and see what the most common form of citation style is there, and maybe utilize that so that you get into the practice of using that style and you kind of know how it works. But the key thing that I want to do with citations in this class is just get you used to using them, knowing when to use them, knowing how to insert them into a paper, how to construct a bibliography. You've probably had some exposure to this. It becomes much more important, I think, in college, where you're doing more extensive research and you're kind of becoming socialized to the expectations of what happens within your field of study. So citation is really, really important. But that's all that citations are really, is it's just a way to kind of establish the lineage of an idea or claim. So why do we cite? Why do we cite sources? Well, the kind of disciplinarian's response to this would be, well, if you don't cite your sources, that's plagiarism. And if you plagiarize, you are engaged in a form of theft, and you can get a 0 for the assignment, or you can get kicked out of university. It has all of these negative repercussions. That's true, right? So if you present an idea that is someone else's and you don't kind of give them credit for that idea, you are in fact misrepresenting your own work. You're misrepresenting someone else's ideas as your own by not adding that citation. But that's kind of a short-sighted way to think about citing sources, I think. It's like if somebody said, why do you pay your taxes? And you said, well, if I don't pay my taxes, I'll go to jail. Well, that is very true, right? If you don't pay your taxes, eventually you'll be charged with tax evasion, and there are serious repercussions for that. But a more comprehensive answer to that would be something like, well, taxes are important and they support public works and roads and bridges and highways and the education system and all of these really important things that we value. So yeah, I'll pay taxes to support those things that we all share. I would urge you to think about citing sources in a more expansive way than simply, if I don't do it, I'll get in trouble. Because citing sources is really a kind of an important aspect of intellectual exchange and the educational experience. So my less disciplinarian answer to why we cite sources is three things. One, it establishes the source of the ideas, right? So it makes clear to your reader what ideas are your own and what ideas you're pulling from someone else. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that it can bolster our arguments or claims. So if we're utilizing evidence to make a claim and we're drawing upon sources that are good sources, good, reliable, well-researched sources, that actually makes our argument stronger, right? So if you're advancing a claim and it is clear that you're drawing upon good research, good textual sources, authors that are respected, and we know that they put forth solid ideas, then it actually makes your argument stronger. On the flip side, if you're citing random web pages or books that are not published in reputable locations and reputable publishing houses, if you're citing random things that can't be verified and aren't subject to scientific scrutiny or outside review, then that makes your argument weaker. But if you don't cite those sources, we have no idea what is the strength of the underlying evidence on which this claim is being made. So citing sources can, if you're utilizing the right sorts of material and you're really digging into your source material and it's good, it can actually make your argument a lot stronger. And then number three is what I call the trail of breadcrumbs. So when I'm trying to learn about something and I'm kind of, looking for information about a specific topic, I start to dig into, the research that's been done on it. And one of the most helpful things for me as a social scientist and a researcher is when I find a really, really good article that is referencing lots of the literature and lots of the research that's been done before, and they cite all their sources, and it's well put together, well structured, and it's easy for me to then flip to their works cited page and go and find those other sources. It's like a holy grail, right? The same goes for you, right? If you're writing something and someone is reading it and they're really interested in the topic and they want to go and read more, you can give them kind of a map, a pathway into those other sources so that they can go find them and engage in intellectual inquiry. And so that conversation that happens in colleges and universities and among researchers and people that want to understand things on a pretty sophisticated level, it really depends on us citing our sources and stating where we're drawing ideas from. Okay, so that I think is the more the kind of more intellectual grounding for why citing sources is really important. Okay, so when do we cite? Well, you should be citing sources if, one, you're utilizing a direct quotation from another work. So if you are, referencing a book that you read in the honors college or, an article that you found online and you are quoting it directly, you absolutely should be citing that source. If you're not, that's really problematic. That's the worst form of misrepresentation, right? So anytime that you're quoting something directly, yes, absolutely, there should be a citation. Where it gets a bit more tricky is when you're paraphrasing things, when you're presenting an idea, a claim, a fact, a stat that you've encountered, right? In those cases, you cite that if it's not your own original idea, right? It's not something that you're putting forth as your original idea, and it's not common knowledge. So the fact that the United States has 50 states, you don't need to cite that. That's common knowledge. It doesn't require a citation. But if you were to cite some statistics about the number of people that have a college education in the United States, and you found them in a specific report, and you wanted to include that citation in a paper that you were writing, absolutely, you need to cite that. Same goes for ideas, right? So if you're referencing something that you read in a philosophy class, you're not quoting it directly, but you're talking about an idea that a thinker put forth, and you want to incorporate that into your paper, but you don't necessarily want to quote it. Well, you can still have the citation there and lead your reader back to that original source. So those are, that's kind of the criteria for when we cite. How do we cite? Well, first and foremost, utilize a citation style. I mentioned some of these at the outset: MLA, APA, Chicago. Find the citation style that works for you, right? That works for your field, your major, and get a style guide, or utilize one of the many style guides that are available online and follow it closely, right? Look at how they say you're supposed to cite sources and utilize that. And the biggest advice I can provide is don't improvise. If you have, something that is a little bit tricky and you're not sure how to do it, chances are there's a format for that. So try to follow it as closely, and eventually it becomes somewhat ingrained. If you're using the same citation style over and over again, you have a better sense of how you're supposed to approach this. As I said at the outset, you should ensure that you're using both an in-text citation and a bibliographic citation. So both that, either a parenthetical citation or a note, a footnote, an endnote, and then there should be the full bibliographic citation somewhere. All of that is going to depend on what citation style you're using. So really the key, the starting point is getting some guidance on the specific citation style, and kind of most of the time they'll have lists of different types of sources and how to cite them. The last thing I would say is that if you're using an unconventional source, so not a book or an article, but you have a movie or a web page or an interview that you did with someone yourself, it's a personal interview, an email exchange. A lot of times I'll get emails from students to say, how do I cite this? This is weird, and I can't find a way to format this citation. There probably is a way to format that. All of these citation styles are very comprehensive in the different types of resources that they construct citation formatting for. So even if it's something that's a little bit strange, there's probably a way to cite it. One more caveat that I will throw in there, and I'm seeing it more and more, I think, as more of these programs and web pages come online, but there are a lot of citation generators out there, and I use some of them. Specifically, I use a program called Zotero that is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. You create databases of different sources, and then if you want to have a citation and a bibliography for those sources, all you have to do is click and it generates it all for you. What I will say about these things, either the online, you type in a source and it finds the citation material and churns out a citation, or the programs, is that they're not perfect. They produce citations, both in-text citations and bibliographic citations, that can be very flawed. And anytime you do that, you have to go through and give it a very careful kind of scrutinizing to make sure that it is in fact a passable citation. Sometimes I'll get citations that are produced by these programs where they don't have information, and so they just don't include it. So it will literally just be an author's name and then ND for no date. And there won't be a title, there won't be a publisher, there won't be a web link. It's just that. And anybody who, proofread that would say, oh, that's not a sufficient citation. But if you just put your faith in these things and utilize them, you won't catch that. So it's really important to just take a look and make sure after you use a program like that. Utilizing citations effectively. 3 kind of important points here. 1, choose a citation style and follow it very, very closely. Okay, that's the first thing. 2, ensure that your citation actually enables the reader to track down the original source. So even once you've done your citations, once you have your in-text citation, and then you have your bibliography, read over your work and look at your bibliography or works cited very closely and say, okay, if I was somebody who hadn't found this source and didn't know what I was referring to, would I be able to go and find it? And if the answer is no, then there's missing information there or something hasn't been included. But that's the key thing really with citations, is not just identifying that there was a source, but also enabling the reader to find it. And the other thing I would say, and I notice students, even colleagues of mine, struggle with this a little bit, is anytime you're using citations, the style of the paper can suffer, right? Because essentially, no matter what format you're using, there's a disruption in the voice. Even, if it's just a parenthetical citation, all of a sudden there's this information that's kind of interjected onto the page and can break up the writing. And sometimes this is kind of one of the areas where I really push students not to do this. But sometimes if students are unsure about how to integrate the fact that they're quoting from a source, they'll just include all of that source information in their narrative in ways that just destroy any sort of flow of the writing itself. So, a student will say, as Dave Jones argues in his 2008 article, how to screw up a paper, and they'll just include all of that citation information in the actual sentence itself, and you don't need to do that. That's why we have citations. So you could just have, Jones 2008 in a parenthetical citation. That would be sufficient. But as much as you can, try to utilize transition language to soften that disruption. So in this example that I provided, as Glover 2009 argues, citations are extremely important. I've added in language there, so it's it kind of has at least some flow to it. But you want to do that. Other thing I sometimes see students do is just include a quote. No transitional language whatsoever. They'll finish their statement, there'll be a period, and then the next sentence will be a full-length quote from another work with a citation. But that's something that we typically don't do. You typically don't include a citation without some sort of your own language to introduce it, to transition it, and to ease in that kind of jarring experience of moving from one author's voice to another. So that's the third thing that I would say. Citations for this course, obviously a lot of what you're citing is the material from the course itself. You're going to be citing these texts. The reason I stress that, the reason that even though I know what you're referring to in a lot of these papers, that I want you to use citations is just to get into the practice. The practice is really important. And also, anytime you're writing and you're quoting something or you're introducing ideas from another thinker, the impulse should be to cite it. Okay. There are some helpful websites, some helpful resources for thinking about citation. The one that I usually direct students to is the Purdue Online Writing Lab, or OWL. That's the writing lab at Purdue University, and they have all sorts of guides, criteria for different citation styles. So if you just go to their main page, they have MLA, they have APA, they have all sorts of different formats with regard to citation. UMaine also has a really great library guide that is not as comprehensive as the Purdue OWL site, but also very useful for tracking down citation styles and providing guidance in how to use citation. So I would suggest that as well. And I'm always there for you as a resource as well. So if you have questions, if you encounter something that's kind of strange or unusual and you're not sure what to do, feel free to shoot me an email. And if there's one thing I have, it's plenty of experience in citation. Years and years of academic writing has kind of drilled that into me. So I'm happy to help in any way that I can. So the key focus for this week's weekly writing assignment is going to be citation and ensuring that you use citation properly. And I look forward to reading your work. All right, thanks a lot.